At Beyond Four Walls, we believe everyone deserves to feel safe, especially when working alone. That's why we support the Holly Gazard Trust and their personal safety app, Holly Guard Extra. With a simple shake or tap, the app raises an alert, instantly sharing your location and recording audio and video, capturing vital evidence. The alert is sent to a police-approved contact centre, where trained professionals take action on your behalf and send support directly to your location. Stay safe, stay protected. Visit hollyguard.com to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Future Group, delivering smarter, safer and more sustainable solutions for the built environment. From fire safety to lighting and electrical, cutting-edge EV charging, advanced security systems, regeneration works, and full-scale decarbonisation. We've got your property needs covered. Trusted by property managers across the UK. Visit future-group.uk. Future Group, leading today for a better tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Four Walls, podcast where we explore the stories, challenges and breakthroughs that shape the people behind the properties. I'm your host, Jodie Fraser, and today I'm joined by Jess Parmar, a powerhouse with over 20 years of global experience in property management, working with some of the biggest names in the game, from Hilton Worldwide, FTSE 250 companies like Regis. Jess is a visionary when it comes to leading organisations through growth and transformation, all while keeping people and purpose at the heart of the process. And what sets Jess apart is her passion for creating joyful, impactful and thought-provoking resident experiences. She believes in building community through connection, not just transactions. And her work is rooted in a beautiful balance of methodology and meaning. As Jess says, 70% science, 30% art. In this unique philosophy has guided her approach to leadership, customer service and ultimately legacy building. In this episode, we dive into Jess's journey, the lessons she's learned scaling businesses and how she's redefining success in the property world, one human experience at a time. Welcome, Jess. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks, Jodie.
Okay, no worries. So can you take me back to the beginning of your career and what drew you to the property and hospitality industry?
Yes, absolutely. So it's kind of going a bit further back than that. I actually practiced in a family law firm and was practicing family law for a little while whilst doing my LPC, and I absolutely loved that area of law. It's the area that really drew me to working within the legal system, helping others, and really what I would think is fighting for the good, if you like. But in practice, that isn't always the case. In practice, you're given whichever case comes through your door, and sometimes they can be very, very challenging. And so at 22, 23 years old, I wanted to do something a bit more exciting, a bit more adventurous, something that wouldn't weigh on my shoulders when I went home. So I just randomly decided, well, not randomly, but decided quite promptly that I wanted a change of career, and just happened to be looking on Google, etc., and saw an advertisement to work within the Hilton graduate scheme. And yeah, that's what drew me to it, and I managed to secure that position and had such an awesome time working for the Hilton. And understanding that luxury customer experience, and that's really what kind of kick-started me. It was brand standards and all of that, and yeah, that led me to Mainstay and TPI in this industry.
Okay, so working with, or having worked with, global brands, what were some of your biggest lessons from those environments?
For me, it was very much having an opportunity to learn and observe leadership styles. I worked under a fantastic leader within the Hilton, and the setting of an important vision, training and leadership together. So Hilton being such a global brand, I was really fascinated at how, as a brand, they were able to have and implement standards across the world that were recognisable. And that really, really drew me to them. And then on the flip side, it was a very humbling experience. I was 23 years old. I thought I was, the bee's knees, doing exceptionally well, etc., and really, really confident, as you are when you're young, and going into it thinking, yeah, I'm going to be great at this. I've worked in a law firm. Absolutely, I can do this career. And it was really, really humbling because it taught me that just because you have an expertise in one area doesn't mean that you'll be great in all these different areas. So for me, it really grounded me, gave me the opportunity to learn a whole new skill set, and observe great leadership styles.
So, talking of leadership, property is constantly evolving, hospitality
Mm.
is constantly evolving, expectations, I guess, are constantly evolving as well as to what we want as consumers, as well as everything else in legislation and all that kind of stuff. What does it mean to you to be a good leader?
I think predominantly you're only as good as your team and the people around you. And for me, it's always been about empowering my team, really understanding what matters to them. How does that fit into the bigger picture? How can we build an environment of trust and safety and security? And ultimately, that then leads to an exemplary customer experience. I think it's safety first for your team and understanding and building those relationships. And that's what then leads to that customer centric approach. So yes, for me, it's very much around having a purpose-driven culture. If you have a clear purpose, it's a clear vision that's communicated to your team, and there's an element of trust. I believe that's what great leadership looks like.
Yeah, definitely. And have there been any pivotal moments in your career where you had to change your perspective or approach, or, I don't know, maybe your team not necessarily had a better idea, but you had to collaborate more, or is there been something that stands out that sort of shifted your perspective?
Having a collaborative approach is definitely one that shifts your thinking. I think the one thing for me that stood out in becoming, I guess, being a part of a team player, being on the ground, working my way up through this career to then being a leader in it. I think the one thing that the pivotal moment for me was that understanding how to incorporate everybody's ideas, that everybody's voice matters, and what's the best way to incorporate that. And that really stemmed from going back to my Hilton days. So being a team player at that point, I made a catastrophic mistake within that first part of my early career. And again, working within that team environment, the team rallied around me, they supported me in managing that mistake. I was working in a group booking system and completely forgot to book out a whole group. And they had booked over 100 odd rooms, I think it was 125 rooms, and it came to arrive, check in, and nothing was booked. So as you can imagine, obviously everybody was frantic trying to organise all of this. It was a very busy period. And at that time, the person that was supervising me and then leading that entire hotel could have turned around and said, actually, that was completely, something that shouldn't have happened. Performance managed me, etc. And I could have been out of a job. But instead, they took me under their wing. They really taught me how to rectify the mistake, how to problem solve, how to think on my feet, what team spirit actually meant. And therefore, that really stuck with me. And then, whatever role I've done since, it's very much been about, okay, how can we listen to everybody's voice? How do we allow to create a space for everybody to speak and to be heard? And that's always kind of stuck with me as a pivotal moment in shifting my approach in managing teams or leading an organization.
Yeah, it sounds like you got through all of that really, really well. But as you say, to have somebody so supportive, to be like, do you know what? We are where we are with it, if you like. But
Mhm.
what can we learn from this, and what can you learn from this as the employee? And the fact that you've therefore been able to take that into your own career and into your own leadership style, I think it teaches us so much. Our mistakes teach us everything, doesn't it?
Massively.
It's
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I think you learn so much from your challenges and mistakes. In business, things always don't go your way. Sometimes, you won't pitch correctly, you'll miss an opportunity. Sometimes you hire a member of your team that you think will fit in great, and actually that hire doesn't quite work out. But I think it's having that human element and thinking, right, why has this happened? Why aren't you the right fit here? Could you be another fit somewhere else?
yeah.
Having those open, difficult conversations that can be quite daunting. Even though on my CV I had this wealth of experience, I was new to the game. So I think for anybody that's coming from outside of the industry, joining the property industry now, I think it's really important to take a step back sometimes and say, right, what was the purpose behind this? Talk me through your thinking style, because I think the majority of people don't want to make mistakes. The majority of people do want to do a good job. So
Absolutely.
supporting them in enabling that. So yeah, it's something that I've always thought about. It always leads me back to that mistake, and I've never made that mistake again. So it was a massively helpful learning curve for me.
Yeah, and taking you into the property management industry then, what drew you into property from hospitality?
So I went from Hilton to working with Regis, serviced offices rather. Within that, I was working or creating brand standards. I was responsible for managing a centre that essentially sold office spaces to various clientele within the Bournemouth area. And Regis, being a large corporate, had their set standards. They wanted to do things a set way. But I wanted to do things slightly differently. I wanted to create a different crowd, attract a different type of clientele. So I wanted to create a whole new set of standards. And so I went ahead and I did that, and it was successful. And that to me, one, helped me understand what success looks like. And it again was a team effort, it wasn't just down to me. But those standards is really what drew me to the property industry. My manager at the time that was working at the Regis moved to Mainstay, knew what I wanted to achieve, and told me about a role that he was creating within Mainstay, and that's how that kind of move came about. And I then went ahead and created standards within our own industry, and looking at what that community spirit looks like.
I love that. I think, I'm all for us collaborating and having those sort of, that level, that standard across the board, and that we all strive to achieve in on our day-to-day life. Or what do you think are the biggest misconceptions around our industry?
I think the biggest misconceptions are managing agents just collect service charge and fix leaks. Such a huge misconception.
Yeah.
The role of a property manager, the role of all those that work within that company are doing so many different things, from health and safety, building safety, crisis management, team management, you name it. There's so many new skills that everybody in the industry has to learn. But yet, if you were to ask anybody from outside of the industry, what do they do? They just manage the building, collect service charges and fix leaks. That's kind of what comes to their mind. And I think that narrative really has to change. We're strategic operators. We really have to think about how we spend people's money and how we make that pound go a long way. And treating people as though, treating our residences that we manage as though it's our own home. And I think that does occur, but that we're not just the middlemen. And I think that's a myth that needs to be dispelled.
So if you could change one thing then about the way the industry is either seen or operates, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing at the moment is the staff churn. What I'm seeing a lot of is people moving from organisation to organisation, or leaving the industry. And it's really understanding why. The team are the backbone of the business. So I think ensuring that, we have a culture and an environment that's supportive, that supports them of these huge changes. Gone are the days when property managers were solely managing buildings. They're doing much more than that now. So we need to create a culture that enables them to have the correct training, the correct tools to deliver their roles. So I would change the way in which businesses are training staff. There's a whole heap of information on the TPI website that's always available, and others, and that provide a lot of hosted training, but I don't think it's necessarily always, it's not, people aren't aware. So creating awareness within our industry is important. But yeah, staff retention is a big one. I think if we can retain our staff, I think that in itself will have a massive impact on all the other services that we offer. It's like having laws without police. Rules collapse. So you need to have that system in place. You need to have your team structure correct to then enable you to deliver the level of services that are needed.
And you've spoken a lot about building joyful and thought-provoking experiences. So what does that look like?
It's bringing stories into spaces. And when I think about a joyful experience, for me, it's Disney. Disney's so memorable. It's so iconic. It creates such a joyful mood, and from children right through to adulthood, it's secure, it's safe, and it's memorable. And that's the key thing. It's having memorable experiences. It's creating, a clear vision, a clear operational plan to deliver those communities and build that trust. Yeah, people are joyful when they feel safe. So Disney to me comes to mind in terms of what's joyful and special.
I love that. I love a bit of Disney. So, so does my daughter. It's all about the princesses. So what does a thriving people first building look like to you, or community?
So I think going back to standards, I think first impressions are hugely important. And I think particularly for all those property managers out there listening to this podcast, I would say that think about all aspects of the building from the moment you walk into a reception area. Take that walk from the reception area to your resident's front door. What do you see? Is there litter on the floor? Is the signage correct? Is there old signage? Are you being meted and greeted in a pleasant manner at reception? All those different aspects, landscaping, etc. First impressions are so important because you have a moment to make an impression. And if you're a resident, you're coming in late from work and you walk past and you see that your bins haven't been emptied, that the gardening hasn't been done. Your resident doesn't necessarily know what you've been doing behind the scenes. They might not necessarily have the time to read the newsletters or the messages that you're pushing out. If the first impressions aren't clean, therefore, how are you managing my service charge correctly? So I think that's really critical. If you get those first impressions correct and those standards are correct from the offset, everything else tends to be a much easier conversation because they can see visibly that the upkeep of the building is being managed. So therefore, when things aren't being managed behind the scenes so effectively, or you do have to deliver some bad news, it's a much easier conversation to have. They can see visibly that you care about the building that they live in.
The communal area or the communal space is the first impression of their own home, isn't it? As you say, as they walk through the door, if there's post that hasn't been sorted out or anything like that, it's just sort of chucked to the side, and you don't want your visitors to see that either, do you? You want,
Absolutely.
if you keep your own home lovely and tidy and however you want to keep it, if the communal spaces then are looking a little bit rubbish, you might not want people to come to your home and see that because you might be embarrassed for whatever reason. Or
yeah, absolutely, it's so important to have that nice surrounding around where you live and to be able to invite your guests and your visitors to that space. And as a managing agent, as a freeholder, as a landlord, you want to enable that asset to have good value and to increase value. So it's hugely important.
Switching slightly to sort of mental health and well-being, if you don't mind, do you think our industry does enough, or can they do more or less around supporting the mental health of its people?
I think it's something that's definitely been talked about more. I'm having more and more conversations with other leaders, other colleagues in the industry that are having those important conversations. Definitely, if you look at LinkedIn now, people are able to be more open and honest with their own personal experiences and feel safe to share those experiences, which I think is really important. Do I think more could be done? Absolutely. I think in every aspect of life, more can be done. But there is a balance. I think what I am finding is that it's that balance of, okay, as an organization, you want to be able to support your colleagues and your employees to have open conversations, but we're not trained therapists. And that I think sometimes can be a difficult thing to do because you'll have an open conversation. Sometimes you could open a wound unintentionally. And it's then how do you support that colleague to get through that experience? So I think it's having the right infrastructure in place and the right experts around you to enable you to have a good mental health well-being policy and support system. I think that's really important because it's a lot for business owners and leaders to have those conversations. Sometimes not everybody can have that type of conversation in the right way that person might need. So I think they also need the support to enable them to have that conversation. It's something I call the professional veil. I feel it's something that needs to be lifted. I feel we all experience so many different things in our life that we then go into work and feel we have to put on this word professional, right? We have to wear it. But actually, life is life. There is no work-life balance. It's all part of one thing.
Yeah.
So it's how we can support people to live their life freely and get the right support systems at work and at home.
And you can't always do it. You can't always wear that mask, that professional mask. Sometimes that mask falls off. You're in a work environment and you say something might upset you or trigger you, or you're going through something at home, or for whatever reason you're just struggling, and sometimes you just can't always wear that mask.
Yeah, and I think we're all human at the end of the day. We all have our own lives, our own personal, experiences that we've been through. And more often than not, when you have conversations around mental health or well-being, or just asking somebody, how are you doing? And actually somebody takes the time to tell you how they're really doing.
Yeah.
In those conversations, you realize that there's emotions that connect us. it might be that somebody's having a really bad day and they're feeling upset. They may have a completely different reason for why they're upset, but you have experienced upset in a different, time in your own life. So therefore you're able to connect and understand why they may be feeling that and support them through that. But yeah, if you're in that professional mode all the time, or what we consider professional at large, I think people are hesitant in a work environment. They feel if they are themselves or if they have a bad day, are they going to miss out on a promotion? Are they going to miss out on having that career opportunity they've worked so hard for just because they've had one bad day? I think that's what needs to change.
You've spoken very openly about your IVF journey, and if you're happy to, are you okay to share a bit about that experience and how it's shaped you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a title mum that I wear very proudly now because it's
Yep.
been such a long time for me to trying to conceive. So we were trying for 10 years. Never expected to go through that. But as with anything in life, things happen, so you work through it. And I would say a large part of it was really, really difficult. It was difficult to concentrate at times because you're thinking about when you need to take your next injection, have you taken your medication? I've got this appointment. How am I going to have that conversation to ask my line manager? I need to take some more time out for that meeting. So there's so many different stress factors that come into it, so many thoughts that come through, and then another colleague is celebrating that they're pregnant and they're going on mat leave. And when you're in that journey, you feel so many different emotions, and it's a really, really lonely time because not everybody shares that they're going through that. It's quite an isolating thing, and I think it's something that does need to be talked about more. From feeling jealousy, which is such a natural, emotion, but you do sometimes feel, okay, why are they in that position and I'm not? To then feeling sad and feeling hurt by it, to then feeling anger, as to
Yeah.
where this is going, to then coming through that and feeling okay with the situation, understanding that, sometimes these things happen. How can we find a solution? It's such a roller coaster of emotions. And then
Yeah.
the hormonal injections, add to that. And it's not just for, the women that are going through that, it's also the men, the partners that are supporting their wives through that. And that again, don't open up, don't necessarily always talk about it. So it was a really, really tough experience. I'm really, really fortunate we found a solution to our problem with infertility. And we now have my little baby girl, Dia, after so long. And that's why I do talk about it on LinkedIn, and I do share my journey because it was through somebody else sharing theirs that we found our happiness and our solution. So yeah, I think it's so important just to share it and talk about it and know that it's okay to feel all these different emotions, and to, if things don't work out how you wanted it to, you're absolutely good enough. You
Yeah.
don't need a child to define you. You don't need that. It's a great addition. It creates a lot of happiness and joy, but it's not, you are good enough as you are. And I think that doesn't get said enough to a lot of people going through infertility.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Congratulations, by the way, that
Thank you.
of your little girl. It must have been such a tough journey for you in 10 years as well. And I'm sure you went through a lot of that, as you say, without telling a soul what was going
Yeah.
on and having to sort of work through everything. And how did going through that affect you showing up as a leader, an employee, an employer? How did you feel having to deal with that and do all of your work at the same time?
So we went through 9 rounds of IVF, and that in itself was a lot over a extensive period of time. During the early part, I think it was a little bit easier because we were naive to the process of IVF. So I just kind of went with the flow and got on with it. But after every negative pregnancy test, after every miscarriage, it got harder and harder. I was fortunate that I was able to have an open conversation with my line manager at the time, and told him of my journey. And then with this industry, as you know, it's all consuming. It's 24/7 at times, and you're up and down the country depending on where you manage buildings, etc. So the travel, the being away from home, the different appointments, it was tough. So I took a decision that actually I wanted to work more locally. I wanted to be in a senior role, and that's when I moved across to my last role. And that was a choice that I made. I couldn't do everything all at once. And I think that's okay. I think as women, we juggle so many different things, home, work, life, etc. you can't do it all of the time. So it was just making a conscious decision, right now, this is my focus. So I'm going to not be as excelling in my career as perhaps I would have been, but a role that I felt was good enough for where I was. And then, working with the team that I had and being fortunate to have a fantastic team that supported me, through that. Shout out to Lucy and Amelia. They were absolute legends in supporting me through my journey. And, there when I had every miscarriage, there when I had an appointment, there to say, don't worry, Jess, we've got this. You do what you need to do. Yeah, it was really tough, but I think the biggest thing that you can do to support anybody going through this journey is just create a opportunity to talk about it and know that it isn't easy, but it builds so much resilience and patience. And that's been my biggest learning curve from it. It has taught me that you keep on going and it's okay. Whatever the outcome is, you put in every effort and the outcome isn't within our control. And that I've taken into my life with everything that I now do. And it's just put in every effort that I want and then leave the outcome to the universe, whatever it is.
Just to hear your compassion and empathy for others, and you're amazing, Jess. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. To flip back a little bit more into the working world, you have a lovely quote: 70% science, 30% art. So can you break that down a little bit more for me and explain how it shows up in your work each day?
Yeah, so when I was working at Regis, I heard of the story about Google wanting to rent office space from Regis, and they took their idea to Yale. At the time, they had the yellow pages. They said, "Look, we can put all of your yellow pages onto the internet," and that's how Google pitched it to Yale. Yale decided they weren't going to take up the concept, and Google then was formed. So they set up their business on their own and are hugely successful, as we know. So I started to look into that and understand, okay, how did that work? How did that come about? And I landed on, there was a formula that was being worked on. Yale had a fantastic formula that was being adopted, but it was tired, it was aging, and Google came in and used that formula, but created something bigger and better. The 70% art is a formula, it's a methodology. Once you figure out that formula, it works. And you can keep adapting it, keep working on it, but it will work. And then that 30% is your art, it's your creativity, it's your flair, it's what's bespoke to that particular client you're working with or understanding the needs of a particular customer. So it's very much having a flair on things, but knowing that when you have a methodology, keep repeating it, and just improve it. But you have a method that works. And that for me has been my kind of go-to within my career and something that I feel I've created a formula in terms of organizational growth, team management, and that methodology has always worked for me. And then I adapt it depending on who I'm working with or the needs of a particular client or customer.
Well, I love that. This is coming from someone who, I love a list. I love a process.
Yeah.
Kind of know where you are with something, but also having that ability to change it up a little bit, which will maybe help you. It might help the person you're working with, or it might just make it better for the next person that comes along. I think that, yeah, great idea. But what advice would you give someone entering the industry, ultimately who wants to lead with purpose rather than going after the money?
Yeah, I think both are important. I think
Of course.
unless you're a charity, you need a profit to make a business successful.
Mm-hmm.
But you won't succeed unless you have a clear purpose, a clear vision, and you share that vision. I think quite often a leadership team can have a vision that they believe is great, and they've worked really, really hard to create that vision. But when they share it, either they share too much, so therefore they share every detail that then everybody holds them to account to it. But as we know in leadership, sometimes things can change, details can change. You have to be flexible and work with the environment you're in. Or they don't share anything at all. They go radio silent. So for me, I would say anybody that's starting a business, have a clear vision, have an overarching business plan, share that with your team, share that with your clientele, your customers, and then work towards that. Focus on each element of your business and build it brick by brick. And ensure that when you are in a position to hire a team or when you are in a position to grow your business, you have the right tools to deliver the levels of service that you're after. It's all good and well having a plan that has the vision of delivering a 5-star service, but have you ensure that your management agreements allow you to ensure that you're charging correctly for the elements that you're delivering, those service elements? Do you have the right suppliers that you're working with? Are they sharing the same vision as you? Are they partnered with your approach? Are they purpose driven like yourselves? Whatever it may be. But yeah, that needs to be clear. And I think if you don't have that clear vision, partnership, approach with your team, customers, and colleagues, a leaky bucket syndrome can occur. So you grow and then you're winning new business, but you're leaking the other side, or you're gaining new team members, attracting talent, which is fantastic because you're doing so well, but then you've got low retention rates. So yeah, it's an ever-growing cycle. And I would say that have a very clear vision, communicate that vision, and make it easily adaptable.
I love that, and probably a great thing to end on. But is there anything you'd like to add before I let you go?
Oh gosh, good question. Look, regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of what job role you're in, we're all human and we all have different experiences that we go through. And, you forever hear now the words be kind, but it's so important. It really is important to just stop sometimes and just listen to what somebody is explaining or sharing with you. And take time to listen to somebody's story. Take time to listen to what a customer is actually saying, have that moment to breathe. It's so fast paced now. Everybody wants something now. So I would say just pause a little bit, just take a breath. Not everything is urgent. So just have that moment for yourself and for your customers and those around you, and just breathe a little bit.
Well, great advice. Thank you so much for being with me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jodie. Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Of course. You take care.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my latest podcast. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. The links are in the show notes. Or you can contact me on jodie@jodiefraser.com. For more content and updates, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favourite platforms. Thank you once again for listening. Until next time, take care.